So what we're going to want to start doing then, after we've gotten through our initial warm-up period, we'll start looking at the bones and the muscles and how they contribute to that. But for now, unless you're an anatomical savant, just go ahead and draw what you see and have fun with it. And these I'm using are Stabilo. They're kind of waxy, so it doesn't smear as much. I'll use that. I'll use just a cheap ballpoint pen. Sometimes I'll use a fountain pen. It's a nice way to work. Again, doesn't smear. I smear a lot. I'm always on the paper like this, so that's good for me. And then sometimes I'll use Carbothello, and I'll show you those. This is just newsprint. So that's, having sharpened that, I'll just use this. So as I draw this one thing, the head, I really want to see it in relationship to everything else. And it has a certain position, a certain stability or potential energy in space. And I can get as much of that head laid in. He's got this great face and skull shape. It's really fun to draw. And then if we play that ear, we just take this up here and do this a little bit so you can see it. Make it a little more boxy. So I'm interested in getting that simple structure. And then I want to see how that structure works in relationship to the other structure or structures around it. And what I'm really looking for then is to get a solid part, a three-dimensional part, that structural idea, and then find an out. How do we get out of that structure and move on to the next structure? So then the gesture kind of has a couple functions, really. It's showing the long axis curve. It gives that watery design, but then that watery design flows. It's going to help us flow into the next idea, or it might bind against the next idea. And that's going to give us hopefully what we need to move all the way through the figure. And you can just draw a shape or two and get all these structural and gestural truths. Or you can get the whole figure laid in. Notice that ear is the only feature on the side of the head. And so it's particularly valuable for us because as soon as we get features on the front of the head or the front of the box in relationship to something on the side of the box, now we're feeling that interior corner. We're starting to move over the form in the parlance of our lesson. And then we feel that third dimension. Okay. And we get enough of that head that we can find the next structure, the neck. And it will work on the same gesture line. They'll flow together like a straight arm does, or they'll break apart. One will go one way, one will go the other, this to that, or we'll keep on flowing down through. Notice that in this case, we've got the head, the neck, and the torso all lining up on the same gestural center line. They're all in the same facing dimension, and they're all based on that long axis curve, and all their separate curves happen to align, and we get a greater curve out of them. And as soon as that kind of thing happens, we instantly feel it's more graceful. It's usually more pleasing to us, but there are a few psychos out there who don't like that kind of thing. But generally, when the colors look harmonious, the gestures, the curves of the parts align, those separate things coming together, composing off the curve idea, makes it, by definition, seem more graceful. And that makes it usually more attractive to us. Now, as an artist, you may want to play that up, or you might want to go way against that. So what you do with that's up to you. And then notice that the more closely the new gestures, let's just make this really simple to the leg, the more closely these gestures all break apart now, but they're still generally aligning on this moving up and moving down on that same curve, and so it feels again rather graceful, even though they're composed of different gestures. They're a near alignment, and then as things break off more dynamically or dramatically, then we start to get variations off that theme. But the fact that going from head to toe, they're all aligning in a very close set of relationships, that makes it a lovely pose. And then the arms then become kind of a subplot to our main story. The main story has this lovely through line where the big stuff all works together, and then these secondary forms start to break apart, and that adds variety and interest and doesn't do much. Just like adding these little lumps and bumps add variety and interest. It doesn't do much to destroy that composition, that cohesion. And we can notice, take just a little area. I'm just going to take this end of the upper leg, the knee, around the knee structure, and I'm just going to play with that as a series of structures that may or may not be rendered, and a series of gestures. So I might be interested in this just little waterfall of information here. And just playing with those attachments as we'll look at, and architecture and gestures that result from. And we can always then, in a fairly organic way, I guess literally an organic way, build on that. Start in the center and build out, and again, have it be convincing and ring true by having it flow away or bind against. So we're constantly thinking gesture, structure. The long axis flows down, and then short axis we move across. And then we add the next idea, down and across. once we understand those rhythms, we can start playing games. Now that head sticks fairly straight like a lollipop head and neck on that nice fluid spine. So maybe I want to just play the curve. So I'm going to take that straight and sneak it into a little bit of a curve or into more of a curve than it really is. And that's one of the advantages of having a sense of gesture structure is we can impose new truths. We can actually distort it into a brand new direction. It's a little more dangerous. Or more likely, safer bet is just to push the idea that's already there. But again, it's all in relationship. Notice if we keep the marks going around the contour, the sides of the neck, the sides of the head, the sides of the ears, the top of the head, moving on the sides or around the ends, it's going to seem flat until we do something, a construction line, a constructed detail, maybe the skull coming down to that nuchal line there, connecting into the spine, until we move over with some kind of detail. We're not going to feel that third dimension. Notice if we keep those long lines straight, we feel the structural power of the stability where we start to lose that fluid sense of potential energy, and it starts to become that dead art. Literally, it becomes a lifeless drawing or painting or sculpture until we feel that long axis curve. We won't always feel it every time, but if we feel it most of the time, let's say, and there's all sorts of ways to sneak it in. Notice if we treat this forearm as a straight, stiff structure, it's doing this kind of thing. That cancels out and gets stiff and straight. And let's say for whatever reason I just had to do that, but I still want to bring a curve into there. I could do it with, there's several ways to do it, but I could do it with a core shadow, say. I like to change sizes too, so that I'm not always drawing exactly the same size. It's going to free me up for, if I have to do little figures in a big composition, if I have to do a big monumental work, I'm not limited to 2-inch heads, say. And that happens. A surprising number of fine artists figurative artists will always paint their heads or their figures the same size in a sketch class or in finished work even, and then they're stuck if they're offered a big commission for a library or petting zoo, something like that. An important career move. They just can't pull it off. So mix things up. And notice how it rings true if you get the gesture. If you get little or no structure, the gesture will still do most of the important work. If it's all just gesture, then you just end up with a stick figure, and that's of no use. You can't take it any farther with any assurance that it's going to be accurate. But if every once in a while, in the areas that aren't so important, say, don't have important connective tissue, the hands aren't holding something, the feet vignette out of the composition, you can let the structures go away or be diminished.